Okay, there it goes. All right, so I'm going to do a new, I'm just going to open a new file, new shell. And the thing I wanted to do, we talked about ifs last time. No questions about those? They make perfect sense. If, else, if. I just wanted to show an embedded one. So this is an if inside of an if. Like a lot of things, you can have, and when we talk about loops, we can do this too, that you can have a loop inside of a loop, or an if inside of an if inside of an if inside of an if. You can actually go, I think, 255 levels deep. Again, that would be utterly insane. Nobody should ever do that. And in fact, if you ever go on a job interview and they talk about optimizing code, embedding is usually a bad idea for optimization, particularly for loops. If you have a loop inside of a loop inside of a loop, things slow down. So if you want your code to move faster, your loops should not be too deeply embedded or not embedded at all. There's actually a mathematical formula to test that, but we won't do that. This is from one of the things in the practices. And again, one of the things that I would suggest is doing some of the other practices. Just find them that are interesting, or just think of your own little programming problems to play on. Because if you do just the stuff for class, it's not going to stick very well. That's true of me too. I mean, the way I've been, unfortunately, on my weekend just doing some Python just to make sure that I refresh and to look ahead and see the things that I don't, that I haven't looked at before, because as I said, it's my first time through Python too. Although I've done Python before, it's just I didn't study it in any organized way. We're going to do one. This is the problem description. So basically, there's a town that has traffic fines. They all have traffic fines. Where I live in Eatonville is known as a trap, speed trap. They slow you down to 25, and they make most of their money by people that don't slow to 25. So thing is that it's I'll just do a dollar sign, $5 for each mile above the speed limit. And then there's a maximum of $200. Okay, so that's the problem. And basically one way to solve, there are more than one way to solve it, but I'm going to do it with an if inside of an if, basically. Does that make sense? Is this sort of a problem? Where would you start? What would you do first? Well, we're going to input. We'll do the input for the speed limit and the what speed they're going. Yeah. All right. So let's. So we could either set the speed limit, or we could have it entered, because it could be different places, right?
Yeah, can you just set like speed limit equals 25? And
you could.
The speed they were traveling.
We could make it like a comp. So then we could just input the speed. So we need the speed limit, whether we hard code it or so. And then we need to input the speed that they were traveling. I can't type.
Yes, I would then try to figure out what speed, if you're hard coding the speed limit in, figure out at what speed the fine equals $200, and then say like if they're traveling this or above, the fine is automatically 200. If it's less than that, then do.
Well, so I would do sort of what you're thinking, although I would do the 200 after.
Okay.
So I would just say, are they speeding? First, I would, test,
Yeah.
test are they speeding? That would be my outer if. Inside of this, there's a couple of ways you could do it. And if you have a different way, feel free to explore, because this isn't really an assignment. It's just So I would just say, I would get the miles over the speed limit, right? Then I would just multiply each mile by 5. Each mile over by 5. And I would return that number, or, and this would be the if the fine is greater than 200, then I would just set it to 200. Does that make sense? Not T9, but 2. Does that make sense as a thing? One reason I'm doing this, and we'll do this with a couple of other things too, is I really think it's a good idea to kind of walk it through and think about it. Now, you could try yours. You could try to see what the max speed would be.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're not trying to do a variable program where it could be used for whatever the speed, like what is the speed limit? It's 35.
Yeah. So it would be hard to do that if you had a variable. If we input the speed limit as fixed, then that would be easier to do. Yeah. So should we do the speed limit as fixed, or just allow them to enter it? So different areas of town. A lot of times in a town, there's some places that are 25, some places that are 35. Yeah. So if we want to do, I'm going to do this as functions because I want to give you the the practice of doing that. So I'm going to do def. Let's do get speed limit. And what I'll do is just limit equals int input and I'm going to return. Oops, I need another print. I'm going to return the limit. So that's one function. What would be the next one, do you think?
The speed that they were tracking.
Yeah, okay. Get, should I just say get speed? You can name it, but yeah. So speed equals, and we're just doing this, and you could imagine that this comes from a radar gun. And I'll return speed. All right, so then we want to test this, right? All right, what do I want to call this? Let's call it determine fine. Now, probably we want to pass in to this the limit and the speed, right? Because we need to know those two things to calculate this. I said I'm very tired, so if you see me doing something dumb, let me know. But does that make sense so far? We get the input limit, we get the speed, and here we're going to calculate. So I'm going to say if speed greater than limit, I'm going to do this as an inner thing. So I'm going to do two of them inside of here. I'm also going to, because you could do this with separate ifs, but I'm going to try to do an embedded if. I'm going to say fine equals 0 to start here. Python doesn't seem to be too picky about the block definition, but I think it's a good idea to define it outside the block. The speed is greater than limit. I'm going to say fine. The other thing we might do in here is penalty per mile or penalty per MPH equals 5. Just following your thing about naming things. All right, so it's not an empty. So fine equals, actually, before we do the fine, let's get what the, I'm just going to say over equals speed minus limit, right? Is this too far down on the page? Is that better? Don't know what those spaces do for the program, but. And then fine would equal basically over times penalty per mile per hour. I think that's a kind of an awkward name, but all right. And then I'm going to, as I said, I want to do an inner if. So I'm going to do if fine greater than 200. And I need a colon there. Fine equals 200. And I think we can just do return fine, right? So does that make sense? We have an outer if that tests whether they're over the limit at all, right? And then if they are, and it's only, you don't want to do these calculations unless they are over the speed limit. So if they're over the speed limit, this says that they are greater than the speed limit. So we're going to subtract the limit from the speed. We can do that because we know the speed is bigger than the limit. Otherwise we get a negative number.
Would it matter or not, or should you, for convention's sake, have an if in there that says, you know, like if the travel speed is less than the speed limit, then it returns no.
Well, so you could do, what it's going to return is just a 0 if it's less. So you could do that, but you don't need that.
Okay.
What? Okay. You don't really need an else, and you don't need a separate if, right? Because this is, all of this will only happen if this is true. So we're only testing that. Otherwise, the fine is 0. And you could just do this as a separate if. You don't have to do it internal to this, but I wanted to show an internal if. Right. So you can have an if inside of this. Again, so this, the fine is assigned. This is just testing that the fine is over 200. If it is over 200, then it's just 200, right? And then we'll return the fine. I just wanted to show what an if inside of an if looks like. Again, this would work perfectly fine if this if was not embedded. That makes sense. But as I said, I wanted to show you that. Does that make sense the way it is then, everybody? We'll see if it works. One of the things that I should do actually probably is test these as we go on. But all right, so we want to probably next just do print fine amount, print, call it ticket. And we will want to put in the fine here. We'll pass the fine. The other thing I would probably do for this I would use another if, right? If fine greater than 0, print your you can make this fancier if you were to put out the like the over amount. You might actually break this into a thing where you figured out what the over was as a method. But anyway, we'll just say that UO type for speeding. And here I would do an else. And a print. Thank you for visiting or something. Okay. So that's the print here. It's not going to return anything. It just determines what to print based on the value. And then the very last thing will be the main, def main. And in that we will call, we want to get the speed limit. So I'm going to do like limit equals get speed limit. Can I move that up? Yeah, I can. Speed equals get speed. And again, you could use different variables there. And then I'm going to say determine fine. So fine equals determine fine, and I need to pass it limit and the speed. Did that work? And then we can do print ticket. So it's just ticket. Actually, this should be def ticket. All right, so ticket, and we pass it to fine. So we get the speed limit, we get what speed they're traveling. We pass it to the thing that determines if there's any fine. And then we say what the ticket is, if it's anything. Does that make sense? You guys are so quiet. Are you as tired as I am?
Can you go back down?
Sure. How many weeks do we have left? About 4,
6.
5, 6. So we'll probably cover a lot more than the assignments do, which is fine. You get stuff, but you're not responsible for it. as I said, one of the things I think we'll do is we'll build a really simple, stupid game once we have loops. And we can look at loops in terms of just, it's a guessing game. If you choose a number between 1 and 1,000 randomly, you get 10 guesses to get it. If you're organized, I could always use this as a Rorschach block for people. If you have a really logical mind, you can always get it. It may take all 10 guesses. You have to use a very structured approach to it to get it. But it's not that fun a game. But all right, I'm going to save this. So I'm going to go to Documents, Python Programs, Tickets, I guess. I might show you the wheres too today, but I want to talk about the assignment first. As I said, we're running a bit ahead of the assignment. You guys are doing good when you turn stuff in, and most of the stuff has been coming in on time. So let's see. I'm going to run it. Let's see what we get. Nothing, because I didn't call main. I wrote main, but I didn't call main. Okay, so save. Okay, why do I have an error?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think so.
Get speed limit is these are both lowercase, right?
Yep.
Told you I'm tired, and typing is not my forte. When I was in school, I did my master's thesis, and there weren't any word processors around in those days, which how old I am. I typed my master's thesis 3 times before I finally hired somebody to type it, because I couldn't get a clean copy that saved me. All right, so let's save again. Okay, so speed limit, we'll do 25. How fast do we want them to be traveling? Let's do 45. So that's $100. They'd have to really be speeding to get $200. I think speeding tickets are a lot more than that generally per mile. All right. So let's do it again, but with so $100 means that that was 20 miles over. So it'd have to be like 50 miles over the speed limit or 40. What? Yeah, I mean, usually it's like 150 just to get the ticket, I think. Yeah. But there is, they start climbing pretty rapidly when the way they actually do it, and we could set this up, is usually more stepped. There's a base price. And then after a certain point of threshold, they start adding to it. So if you're doing like 60 in a 25-mile-an-hour zone, your ticket's going to be pretty big. Yeah.
It's a totally different.
All right, so we do the speed limit. We'll do the 25 again. I'm going to say that they're doing, so let's say they are doing 60. Still 175. I'm trying to get up to 200. Is that correct? 5 times.
Yep.
So it'd have to be 65.
Mhm.
There's a 200. Okay. It's a pain to do this over and over again. For the while, yeah. We could do, let's do a while loop. What? Sure, where do you need,
I don't know, somebody's going with my code.
all right, well, come look. Then we'll do a while loop around that.
This is right.
What is it not like about return speed? Did you get an error, or is it just highlighted? Invalid syntax. Def get speed, speed equals in. Oh, you got two inputs.
Oh,
We fixed it, okay, good. Yeah.
So I can just speed travel. Since it's not fun.
All right, let's look at it. Well, we did print, change the word print there. I checked, this is spelled ticket. Where it says that name print. Change that to ticket. Sorry. Where it says, change this print to ticket.
Oh.
I think I did that. And then it should work. At least that's how it should work. Okay. Others? One of the things I would like to do, we could talk a little bit about this troubleshooting. There's a few things. We can do a while around this first, and then I guess I could talk about troubleshooting, but there's different kinds of errors. I'll just say it real quickly. So there's compile time errors, which doesn't happen as much with Python because it's interpreted. But a compile time error means you have a syntax error. And so when it gives you a syntax, with Python, it breaks on the line where the syntax is, or just after. Does that make sense? So there are compile time errors where the program won't run because there's an error in the syntax of the program. Those are the easiest errors to fix because the program won't run, right? It identifies them. And then there are other errors that are more runtime errors. Okay, so what would a runtime error be? Well, either, yeah. Go
Could that
ahead.
be something like clearly off math?
The math could be totally off, although that's more of a logical. Go ahead.
Like, say, for instance, like a kilometer per mile, I had it on 0 by accident. That was, but it, the program ran fine, it's just that the way I was expecting it,
So there's a subtle, when I think of a runtime error, it's something that breaks the program, but only when it's
Oh, I
running.
see. Yeah. So
Right.
after you've already didn't input them.
So like here's where you have a variable named differently in
Right,
two different places. So it's not until you call something that it crashes because, or if you have a data type mismatch.
Yeah.
You know, so like if you enter, we say int here, we haven't done this. Let me do a quick run this, and where it says, we're in this mode again. Let me kill it and then run it again. If I were to do 50, that's a runtime error too. It crashes the program because the input is wrong. When you get to where you're writing programs for other people to use, you can't assume they're going to be smart about what they enter. So there are all sorts of things you can do to test the enter to make sure that it's of the right kind, and things to do where it won't crash if they enter it, but just tells them try again, you know, that kind of thing. So runtime errors are errors that don't show up until you're running it. And again, they're usually fairly findable. The hard ones are the ones that you guys were talking about, the logical errors, particularly if you have a really big program with a lot of variables and stuff. Figuring out where a variable goes wrong and the math comes out wrong can be difficult. I don't know. So one of the things you can do for those kinds of things is you can make print statements at various places just to see what the variable looks like as it goes through. in compiled programs like C Sharp, where the whole thing is compiled at once, you can put try catches and traps to try to find where the error is occurring. So I mean, there's a lot to doing troubleshooting, but it's actually a really important skill to develop over time. Code almost never works the first time through once you're beyond a certain level of complexity. So even the simple stuff doesn't always work the first time through. All right, let's do a while. We're up ahead of ourselves, but that's all right. So you could do a for loop, which the difference between a for loop and a while loop, anybody know? We haven't really, yeah. Yeah, so were you going to say something similar?
I was gonna say a while loop has higher, can often be infinite if you don't make sure to set in the parameters that'll get it out of it.
You can have an infinite loop if you don't have an exit strategy, yes.
Yeah.
So where a for loop is always given a precise length, right? You're going to do it at X number of times. Now that number of times could be a variable, right? It doesn't have to be fixed in a literal way. It could also be like end of file or loop as long as there's anything in this array, right? So it doesn't, but it's always a fixed number of loops. A while loop goes as long as you want it to, basically, but you need an exit condition. So I am going to say, I'm just going to say continue equals y. Okay. And then I'm going to say while, lowercase w, while continue equals y. And you do a colon, and you need to put these in. I don't know, how many are we? It looks like they're going in 5. I'll do the tab, hopefully it'll work.
You should probably name continue
Something
else,
different, yeah.
That's a
Keyword.
Yeah.
statement.
I was thinking that because I was like, do we need a colon?
Inflow.
Inflow. What would be a good word for it?
Proceed.
Well, you could do a seed, I guess. All right, seed seems weird to me,
Well,
but
no, I said proceed.
oh, proceed. That's not how you spell that.
There's a
No,
C
it's
instead of an
not.
S.
So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the loop, proceed equals input continue well, I'll just say yes, no, yes. The way I have it set up now, anything but a lowercase y will kill it. You can also set it so that as long as it is not equal to n or something, right? So it will go as long as you don't enter the actual letter n. The other thing that I would do is I would probably say proceed to lower. Lower doesn't have a capital L in it, does it? Is it too lower? What is the function name? We did it earlier. Is it just lower?
Yeah.
And lowercase l, right? The reason I would do this is so if you enter a capital Y, it will make it a lowercase y, so it'll match. Now this, to me, it's safer to have a condition where you have to be proactive to keep the loop going. I mean, if I did it as where as long as it is not equal to n, then it would continue looping forever until they were smart enough to actually type in the letter n. So let's try this. this is what's in the next chapter is loops beyond for loop. Right, we did the for loop. This is a while loop. These are really common too, and they do have the advantage that you don't have to start the program every time, right? So I put it in the main with the call here. We could actually put this somewhere else and then call this in the main. But I'm just looping through the calls of the methods here. You don't want to try to put the entire thing into some gigantic loop. This should work. I'm going to save it, and then we can talk about it if it works. So I'm going to enter the speed limit. I'm going to do just 25 again. I'm going to say they were doing 45 and
that lower.
so I'm going to enter the speed limit again. Let's say the speed limit is 55. Let's say they were doing 125. And as long as I keep saying why, it'll keep looping, right? And I can keep doing this program over and over again forever. I'll come back. So,
I got a syntax there for proceed.
okay. Let's look at it. It's probably.
Am I not supposed to use spaces here? Or is that?
That should be all right. That actually looks okay. Maybe we could give you a syntax there. Oh, you know what?
Wildness.
No. Well, while shouldn't be capitalized. That's one. The other thing is everything underneath it has to be indented.
Oh.
Because while is a block.
You can scroll up there. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Where?
Just to like sort of top.
Oh, the very top.
Yeah, because okay, yeah, that's good.
I'll just try to get as much in as possible there. Yeah.
And I was trying to do the same thing, basically have it restart because I was tired of doing it.
Sure.
I was just putting main in main. Is that like really bad?
Well, it's not necessarily really bad, but it does create kind of potentially an infinite loop.
Okay.
Yeah. So an infinite loop is if you have a condition that you can never close, then it will, it'll just loop forever. And you have to kill it other ways, right? Kill the process other ways, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not stopping.
When you say no, let me try not to. Let me make sure, does yours quickly do a different flow?
I can take it.
Yeah, I was just gonna make
Mine
sure
quit when I did no.
I just want to make sure mine does so that I'm not.
Yours needs to, the last line for proceed needs to be proceed equals proceed dot lower, or it will not work.
Sure.
Yeah,
For capital.
the very last line, because I just had proceed dot lower and it was like no, but then I put proceed equals.
Yeah, you're probably right. I think it'll work though, but I didn't try to do it as an uppercase letter.
Oh, when I tried to do it as uppercase.
When I try to do it as an uppercase, it's
So let's try this one more time.
Yes. When I tried to do it as an uppercase is when it stopped the program. I did an uppercase Y in it and it stopped the program.
All
Then
right,
I
so
proceed equals in it.
so I'm gonna do 45.
Is it bad if having like
So I'm going to try uppercase Y. It still goes now because I did the.
Yeah.
Uh, so mine worked. Did you figure out why yours wasn't?
Yeah.
What was it? Okay, but anyone else? Does the while loop make sense to you? Now, there's a couple of things. This kind of loop where it's really good if you're doing like console type programs. You know, if you want to repeat things, you don't need them in like if you're doing a form, right? Because when it's done, your form is still there, and you can you know, still reuse it. Yeah.
I just think it's having it is actually a good debug to keep it there, and then once you're ready to deliver, just comment it out.
You could,
Have
yeah.
nothing like Halo for Cantor.
Even when if you have a form.
Yeah, because like you said, it's like if you don't have it in there, you're gonna break. If
Yeah.
you have it in there, life won't break. That's insurance.
I might show you guys some a little bit more about forms at some point to this quarter, just because, and maybe with actually to Kinter, which is the actual form making thing for. All right, so let's look at the assignment. So we've got, it's about 11. I'll give you a little bit of time on the assignment maybe, or we could look at more loops. I don't know. Where do I want to go? Canvas. Yeah, news is always. Sometimes I wished I just had to enter my number like you guys. It's shorter. So as I said, a lot of these assignments are fairly simple compared to the stuff we practice in class. So is this 5 or 6? It's 5, right?
Yeah.
So it says draw a face, and if you look in the book when it does it, the difference between this and the other time you drew a face is they want you to create it as a function. That's the only difference, right? So in chapter 6:15, so as I said, we've gone beyond this. But I was looking at that because the due date isn't still for a couple of days. When they have you draw the face, I'm going to go 6. Programming, when it says exercise, they mean programming exercise, or I do. And number 15 basically says, write it and test a function to meet this specification. Draw a face, and they want you to enter 3 values, and then they describe it a little bit. So it's basically drawing the face, but using a function. So you guys have all done the face, so it's just a matter of breaking it into a function and calling the function, right? So it's not a difficult assignment compared to what you did. Also, I always meant to say, I looked at all of your faces. I don't always run the code if I know that it works. I mean, I can read it and know it works usually. But I did because it was kind of fun to see all the faces. We should do a gallery of them sometime. So that's the assignment. Do you guys have any questions on that? So it's basically, if you don't have the book, I could probably get you write it out a little bit more thoroughly. They give you a function, the function that they're giving. I'm going to just edit real quick. And I'll just write out what the function is. They have the function as draw face, center, size, and the window. So you pass in those three things and then create a function that draws a face with that. So I said, if you remember, go back to the one where you did draw the face. You have most of what you need there. I might let you guys work on this now, and then I think what we'll do on, or go if you want to do lunch. But what we'll do on Tuesday is we'll talk about that game because it's a fairly complicated program. And as I said, I used to use it for a midterm. Oh, that's the other thing. We have a midterm. We've covered enough now that you can do it if you want.
That one question is still.
Is there still a question that's bad? I thought I changed it.
Yeah, I did it last night and it was still saying it was wrong.
I think what I did,
It's number 11.
let me look at that real
It's the one
quickly.
that asked what the hash tag is for.
But I
No, it's not
changed
there.
that.
Yeah,
I-
no, that one was still incorrect.
Yeah.
What?
I don't know how it works. Maybe you don't publish it or something.
No, I made the changes. Let me go back. So the midterm, and I'm going to add some more, including maybe a final if I can think of what that would be, but it'll be the same kind of thing, multiple choice. So I changed that. Did it not save?
I just did it last night and it said that that one wasn't correct.
So let's look at questions. And that was question 11, you said?
Yep.
Right here. Yeah, it didn't save my changes. So I am going to change it. Did you guys go with the bad answer because for the point?
No, I left it with the correct answer.
Yeah, there we go. That's interesting.
Well, I'm going to say award points both for the correct and the previously correct. And then I'm going to update the question. And I'm going to save the whole thing. So hopefully. So if I accidentally click somewhere, sometimes the answer gets moved. I kind of like these quizzes in the sense that they're self-grading for the most part, but so I put it should give, if you went to with the answer that it said it was, just for the point, you should still be fine.
Yeah, it went through.
Yeah, okay. So it raised you a point or,
Mhm.
yeah, okay. But yeah, you have enough, you should be able to do it if you haven't done that. So the quizzes, and I think it gives you 3 times, no time limit. You can use your book. I'm going to look at the other, I'll try to make sure there aren't other errors like that. Seems like I do that at least once for a quiz.
The first person, the first person to take.
The first person gets screwed,
Like,
yeah. All right, so as I said, I'll let you guys work on that face one if you want, which that was assignment 5, right? Okay. And we'll do something fun next time. I will post this too. Any other questions? Yeah.
Also on the midterm, I got question 9 incorrect.
Okay.
I'm not convinced I actually got it.
Let me look at 9, I guess.
Incorrect person, I chose the.
Yeah, I chose to call it the main function
Mhm.
because it doesn't have a def and it doesn't have a colon on the end.
Oh,
So
so I might have just typed it wrong. That may look.
Yeah.
maybe,
I answered it the same way you did it first,
Yeah.
and then
but then
I-
you switched to.
Well, let me
alternate.
look at it. So it's the last question, the last,
it's number 9, question number 9.
Yeah.
all right, so let's edit. So questions. Come on, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
What does
9.
main represent?
Oh,
Yeah.
so I was thinking, let's see, what did I put as the answers?
It was all of the above is the correct answer.
It's a call to the main function, traditional starting point.
Yeah.
What is sort of the traditional starting point? What was confusing? You did
I
just a.
chose a call to the main function
Yeah.
simply because it doesn't have a colon and it also doesn't have a def.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So to me, that was like.
That's
we're going
fair.
exactly
That's
like-
actually fair. Do you want me to change that answer?
I mean, you're the one making the test.
Yeah, I know, but
I just redid it and answered it with the one you wanted, but I answered it the same.
Yeah, I mean,
for the
I
same
can just do
reason it
that if
works.
you're more convinced that all of the above is the correct answer.
I'm ambivalent. When you do these, one of the hardest things on writing a test is trying not to be, to be clear.
Ambiguous.
Yeah, not to be ambiguous. And I don't always succeed. So what do you guys in general, do you want it, I'll let you guys decide what you want the answer to this one to be. A or B, A or C. All of the above are just
As
a
long
call
as
to
you
the
don't
main.
answer the last one.
Yeah, the last one is the only one that's. So I was thinking main is the traditional starting point, but if you're thinking of it really strictly in terms of the def main, yeah. And actually in Python, it doesn't have to be the starting point, but in most other languages, main is the required starting function. Even in like Windows forms, underneath the Windows forms, there's a main, and what the main does is it calls the form. So in other languages, main is absolutely required. It's not absolutely required in Python. How many have done the midterm? 3? How many would you guys?
We just changed our answer.
Yeah,
You
we
just
just
changed.
changed our,
I'm perfectly fine with just changing my answer
Yeah.
too.
All right, go ahead and change your answer. We'll just leave it at all of the above. Just remember that, everyone. This one is all of the above. And I might rephrase it for next try. Yeah. I will, as I said, rephrase it next time so it's a little clearer, or redo the example a little clearer. Other questions or things? Yeah. So we are actually, the assignment is at the end of chapter 6 on functions, and we've been talking about most of the stuff in chapter 7. Next week, I might start talking about chapter 8 a little bit. There's no assignments that, again, I mapped my assignments directly to Stanny's, and I kind of regret that now. I might talk to her about it, why she chose the one she did. They seem, I think there are more interesting ones you could have done. That would have been more fun for you. So, but we'll do, as I said, we'll do all the fun stuff. We'll just probably, there won't be the assignment. I'm not going to change the assignments after they've been assigned. Does that make sense? Just, it isn't fair to do. So, but the next thing we'll do is chapter 8, and I think the next assignment after the faces is in 8. And it's actually not as easy. It's sort of a leap up in difficulty.
I want to go look at that right now.
Yeah. I think it's number 1 there, the, I can't say it right now, Fibonacci? Yeah, the series, which is actually a really classic computer science problem. It's not hard to do. but it's a little harder to do than what we've done so far. So that one might actually be a little more interesting. The other thing, as I've said before, is that I would look at the other problems. Some of them are real computer sciencey, meaning tons of math, but not all of them. There's usually 2 or 3 or 4 that might be fun to just work on. When I do a book, not so much a textbook, but even a textbook, when I buy like a trade book on Python or something, what I would go through is I tend not to read the whole text anymore. I just read the code samples. And then what I do is if there's something in the code sample I don't understand, then I will write it and run it, and then I'll try to make variations on it. Because if you can vary it, make changes, and have it work, that shows that you understand it. Does that make sense? So typically I just look through, and if there's something I don't understand, then is when I pause and work on it a bit. It's easier to go as you've done lots of these. Like I've been doing programming languages for 30 years, so most of it makes sense to me, although, as I said, I don't necessarily know all the details of how Python does things yet. But practice it and write it. I've done that too. I did my first thing with Python. I should have spent more time on the simple things. Is I wrote a program with a form that talked to Mongo databases. So I did that first instead of doing, simple things like figuring out while loops and things like that. But it was a more interesting thing to do. I learned a lot, and we'll get there too. So you can have time to work on that assignment. I'm going to post this. Any other questions? And as I said, if you don't want to work on it, you can have an early lunch today. But you're also welcome to stay here and work on it. Okay. Oh, you could do more, but as I said, I'm tired and not sure how coherent it would be. Don't know why I'm having trouble sleeping lately. Should start drinking again, maybe.
Like,
that would.
look at the world.
Yeah, there's
Who
that.
wouldn't have trouble sleeping.
News is depressing. There's a lot of depressing things this quarter.
I try to avoid an intake of more than 50
Yeah.
a day into whatever medium.
I usually listen to NPR in the car both ways, but lately I've been turning it either to classical music or to the end.
Yeah.
Reference things.
Yeah,
I
basically,
flashback.
The person I carpool with listens to NPR, so I was like, congratulations, it's only a quarter after 8 in the morning, and now I feel like I need to drink.
Yeah.
She's like, we're gonna do this one once, and then now I expect you to have it memorized. We did it once.
So this is the fun class.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that class.
I
I'm
just made flashcards because like she expects it to be memorized, and I'm like, we haven't used it. I'm fine as long as I can like, pull up, go. Oh, how do I write that again? Oh, that's great.
Yeah, but I like to actually have time to play with stuff in that class. But yeah, like you said, she's just, oh, here's how you do this. Okay, now we're moving on. And it's just like a series of how she's done it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, that's fine and all, but programming is all about going in and like, figuring shit out for yourself constantly.
Yeah.
You're always, going back to documentation in any language.
I'm also just like really scared for the test because I'm like, I can do all this stuff, right? But then you talk with me on it after I've done it once, and I'm like, I need to like,
Yeah.
look, and like, can I just like look at this real quick? I know what to do, but I just need to like look at the syntax. Flashcards. I'm making flashcards. What's that?
It's gonna be a lot of flashcards.
So what we did in class is up there. Use using the source code beautifier, which is kind of neat.
It looks really nice.
Yeah.
You can start in the one direction.
And that's like,
Is that the OneDrive?
It's like crossword. You get one code, that's like a
oh, yeah, that would probably be good.
So,
No, no, I'll get that. Better than trying to use this. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that was all.